Hi everybody, Bearded Rogue here today, and I'm going to take a break from design and print and plays and tools for design and all of that good stuff and talk to you about solo gaming. Solo gaming is something that I think has started being appreciated much more in the industry, but it's been around for quite a while. It's not a new concept, but it's something that's only really starting to get traction. I think there was some questions as to whether or not people would play board games solo, or whether or not solo games had a big enough audience for them to be marketable. And I think people are finding out that the question to that, or the answer to that question is yes. However, there are some questions about solo gaming that are still unanswered for publishers, so they're not coming out at a very great rate, but there have been some really good solo games that have come out in the last, I don't know how many years, since I've been in the board gaming hobby. We'll leave it at that. So I'm going to go through a few of my favorite solo games and give a little brief reason as to why I like the game, and we'll go from there. I've got 5 games, it looks like, that I'm going to go through here. I have a couple other solo games, and I have a few more solo games that I'm actually waiting on. I want to be clear that there's only one game on this list that isn't billed as a solo game, that really isn't solo only, I guess I should say. 2 of them have a 2-player mode. I guess 3 of them have a 2-player mode that is worth playing. But solo is primarily how I've enjoyed these. So let's get to it. So first, I have my Mimic Dungeon Roll box. So Dungeon Roll is a dice game that is ostensibly 2 players, wherein 1 player is rolling the hero dice and 1 player is rolling the dungeon dice. However, the limited amount of rolling that the dungeon dice have is something that a single player can totally handle, and there's enough randomness in the game that playing it solo is not at all a problem. Like you don't feel like you're cheating, you don't feel like you're making it too easy on yourself. As long as you stick with what the dice actually roll, it's largely irrelevant as far as having a second player. Like, having a second player, you can. I've only played this with 2 players once. I've never played it with more than 2 players. I wouldn't advise playing it with more than 2 players. If you're going to, you would almost need a second set, and be running 2 players in the dungeon at the same time. Because while 1 player is controlling the hero dice and 1 player is controlling the dungeon dice, the other 2 are sitting there looking at each other. But if you have 2 copies of the game, which Tasty Minstrel would love for you to do, 4 players should play pretty well. Everybody will be engaged. You'll just be engaged with the person across from you each cycle through. But the reason I like Dungeon Roll solo as a single-player game is because the dice are very different than all the other solo games I'm going to show you. They are inherently random. It's a very quick game. It's a game that, if you already know how to play it, you can play it in well under half an hour. I don't see any reason why this would ever take more than half an hour, but you can certainly play it under half an hour. So I think it's a really fun game. I think it's a really fun solo game. I think it's an okay 2-player game, and as I said, if you had 2 of these, you could play a 4-player game and have it be as fun as a 2-player game. I like it. It's got a lot of variety. It's got a lot of randomness. You know, it's a good way to pass the time. This one, more than any of the others I'm going to show you, reminds me of a game that you would play on a cell phone to pass the time. So that's why I like this one. The next one I'm going to show you may be my favorite solo game, and that's Friday by Friedman Fries. Friday is a solo deck builder. It is probably one of my favorite deck builders, and the main reason why is something that I actually sort of used in my design. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about design, but all of the cards in Friday are challenges that you need to beat, and there's the various numbers of strength that you need to have Robinson have in order to beat those challenges. However, once you beat a challenge, you flip the card over and it goes into your deck as an actual ability that you can use later on in the game. It means that every single card other than your starting deck is double-sided. Or double-ended, I should say. They're double-ended cards, which is a mechanic that I feel doesn't get used often enough in games. In Build the Robots, I decided to have my city cards be cities that you're conquering on one side, and then when you spin them around, they're cards that you add into your deck. Same kind of principle, but this game is awesome. It's really difficult. There's lots of interesting choices. Deciding when you're going to defeat a challenge or whether you're going to lose it purposefully to get cards culled from your deck that are less than desirable cards. To decide whether you're going to try to complete the really difficult challenges early or save them for later when they just get harder on you. It's a fantastic game. There's a randomization factor with the pirates at the end, wherein you know ahead of time what you're building up towards. However, it's random each game. It's two different sets of pirates, so how you build your deck may change based on what the pirates you're going to be facing are. I can't recommend this one enough. Like, this is one of two games that I brought with me to the hospital when my son was due to be born, when we went into the hospital. And this is one of the two games I brought, and it was played in the hospital room overnight when I couldn't sleep. So I love this game. It doesn't take up a lot of table space. It takes up a little bit more than you would need on, like, say, an airplane. But it's a fantastic game. I love it. So next game, and I'm going to do these next two games kind of together because they're very similar, and they have another game that's in the same type, but I don't have pictured. I do have it, but I didn't want to get it out because it's not currently in its box. It's in one of my large multi-game storage things, and that's Onirim and Sylveon, and then the game in between them was Urbion. So let's do Onirim first because I've played more of this than anything else. So, one of the first reviews I ever saw was Joel Eddy's Drive-Thru Review's first review of Onirim. And he highly recommended it. And one of the things that caught my attention was he said that you could play this about anywhere. You could play it on an airline tray table. You could play it in a hotel room. You could play it just about anywhere. Now, the original version of the game was a much smaller box. It was about half this size. Maybe a little bit smaller even than that. But I brought this with me everywhere. I work from home in Kentucky, but the company I work for is in Virginia, and about every quarter, every 3 to 4 months, I fly to Virginia. And having a game that I can play on the trip was fantastic. Having a game that I could play in the hotel was fantastic. It doesn't hurt that the original version of this game had 3 different expansions included in the box, and this version has 7. So it's not a game that is going to get stale on you, because you can play multiple playthroughs of any combination of the various expansions. And some of the expansions are more geared towards making it easier for you, and some of them are more geared towards making it hard for you. All of them are some combination of, we give you this thing that makes it a little easier, while at the same time giving you this thing that makes it a little harder. But it's a fantastic game. Urbion, its sequel, is different. This one requires, the only drawback to this one is that it requires a lot of shuffling. So if you do not like shuffling cards, you probably won't like this game. I don't mind shuffling, so this game was amazing. This is the other game that I brought with me to the hospital when my son was born. So Friday and Onirim came with us. Both of them were played since we were there for over 24 hours. But those are those games. Sylveon, which I don't have with me, is a very interesting balancing act game where you're trying to balance the positive and negative sides on a row of cards in the middle of the table. It also could be played on an airline table, and certainly plays well in a hotel. I've brought that with me several times. I really enjoy that one. It's a very different experience than Onirem. But it's definitely one that's worth playing. Sylveon, however, is the newest one. This one was first available at Origins, I believe. This was one of the first things I ran and picked up at Origins. It was my second purchase of the day after Chaosmos. But Sylveon is a tower defense game. And it's totally different than the other two games. It's still a solo game, but totally different than the other two games, in that this one you are building a forest to protect itself from a rampaging fire that's trying to run through it. It plays like a tower defense game. In the advanced version, you're basically drafting the resources, the army that you're going to use to defend your forest before the gameplay starts. This is definitely the most involved of the three games. I think this one has the most gamey mechanics, the most complicated mechanics. As such, this is a really meaty game. Onirem and Sylveon have a lot of replayability, especially with the expansions. This one, I haven't even added the expansions yet. And it's still offered me a lot of plays. It's a really solid game, and I highly recommend everything in this series. And if what I've told you already about this series hasn't piqued your interest, I want to point out that unlike Friday, which is single-player only, Onirem, Sylveon, and Sylveon are all 1 to 2 players. And there's a very interesting mechanic that they use wherein players share a hand. They have slightly more cards available to them, but they only have a couple of cards that are available exclusively to them, and then a couple of cards they share with their partner, and they can kind of play into that shared hand to get people what they need. But this whole series of games, the Oniverse series, is amazing. I cannot wait for Castellian, which is the next one in the series, or Castellan. I'm not sure what the name is exactly, but I can't wait for it because I will buy every single one of these. Shady Torby, or Shady Torbay, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, is a fantastic designer when it comes to solo games, and all of his titles are really great. The last one I'm going to mention is one that I don't play very often, and it's really easy to get, but it takes a little bit of effort to put together, unless you do what I did, and I'm not sure that that is even a possibility anymore, and that's Aether Captains. Aether Captains is a solo game by a gentleman on Board Game Geek named Todd Sanders. Todd Sanders is a fantastic designer when it comes to print-and-play solo games. He's released an absolute ludicrous amount, and this was his first ever. I had this printed up by Andrew Tulson at Print and Play Productions, which is now, I guess, part of Ad Magic, but this was back when he was still doing his own thing. And Aether Captains is very interesting in that it uses dice in a way that I have not seen before. So, in the Print and Play Productions version, all of these are big wooden cubes with stickers, but the stickers all line up to make, let me see if I can actually do this in a way that is useful. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, I should have grabbed one of the smaller ones. But it's a steampunk game wherein you are defending, let's just go ahead and line it up here, your Zeppelin, made up of dice, from a whole bunch of enemies that are attacking it, which are also made up of dice. And as you take damage, you spin these dice around, and it shows you how much damage you've taken. If you take a certain number of damage, you blow up. The little black dots are the guns that you have to defend yourself, and as you take damage, they'll go away. So you'll have less of an opportunity or ability to defend yourself. You can repair using various crew member and things of that nature. But it's a really fun game. I haven't played this one in a while, just because it's kind of been buried on my shelves, but when I was looking for this, for games to talk about in this segment, and looking at my shelves, this one immediately jumped to mind. The version that I got, and up on Board Game Geek, you can get all of these. There's multiple different dirigibles that you're defending. There's multiple different expansions to make it harder, like you start with this guy right here, and then you can add this expansion, which now you're fighting off borders, and then you can add this expansion, which introduces different kinds of crew, or you can use a different dirigible with different stats, or you can use this really big dirigible, which I think is the one that I showed you. There's so many different things inside of this game, or that have been added to this game, that it really... it's really awesome how much customization there is inside this game. Again, Todd Sanders has all sorts of fantastic game designs, but this was his first, and the one that really got people following him. He has a game on, he has a thread on Board Game Geek that's like, I don't even know, 1,000 pages long at this point, filled with his game designs, but just look him up. If you're at all interested in solo gaming, he has a ton. And I really love this one. I would not have probably built this myself. Stickering dice and stuff like that is not something I'm overly into. But since I was able to get somebody else to do it for me, and Andrew did an amazing job, as always, I just had to get it. So I did. Andrew, by the way, is the guy who was selling BSG Express before it was pulled to become Dark Moon. So he does really quality work, and has some really great eye for detail when it comes to building his stuff. Like I said, I don't know if he's still doing the commission-based stuff like this, or if he's all tied up, but this game is awesome, and you should give it a try. Anyway, solo gaming. D-Day Dice is up there. That's another game I play solo. I didn't get it down. I probably should have, but the video's already 17 minutes long. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I may do another video on solo gaming and why I solo game rather than just solo game recommendations, but I love solo gaming when I have to. I prefer gaming with other people. I think everybody does. But this offers me an alternative to plugging into my cell phone and, you know, playing a match 3 game, or messing around with some app that charges for individual items and has the potential to really hurt my wallet. These were all one-time purchases that I can play over and over and over again. Another one to keep your eye out for is Hostage Negotiator. That is a really fantastic game. I have tried it. I have not gotten it. Alas, the Kickstarters for it have come along during times when I was either backing other things or was dead broke. But that's another game that I can highly recommend based on my plays of it. It's a really good game. It's a little swingy with the dice mechanics, but it's solid as far as design goes. Like, it's a genuinely good time and very tense with interesting decisions. D-Day Dice is kind of that way too. It's very swingy, but as far as I'm concerned, it's much better as a solo game than it is as a multiplayer game. Multiplayer makes it a little bit easier than I prefer it. Anyway, that's been solo gaming, and I'm Bearded Rogue, and I will see you guys tomorrow.